Welcome to Future Forward, a podcast where we share AI insights, one expert at a time. I'll be talking to experts from various backgrounds, ranging from academia to startups, scale-ups, and corporates. Welcome. Hi there, I'm here with Maarten Mortier. I'll let him tell himself what he's doing today, because it's a lot. And I'm Davio Larnout, the CEO and co-founder of Radix. Hi Maarten, how are you?
Hello, Davio. I'm doing great, thanks. So about that introduction, I've been working in tech for a long time, but now I'm currently partner at Miles Ahead. I'm also head of AI at Henchman, and I have a couple of other stints, a couple of other hats I'm wearing, and more of a capacity as an advisor for a number of companies, usually on the topic of AI or at least some modernization of their tech in that direction.
All right, nice. So Miles Ahead, startup studio?
Yep. Studio fund concept where you have both capital, fund investments, pre-seed investments, and then they also move into a lot of these portfolio companies move into a studio concept where we give them advice, help them really hands-on. So kind of as a counter method to the typical spray and pray model, we kind of nurture.
A lot more focused. You pick the right
quality versus quantity, indeed. Yeah.
All right, cool. Henchman, legal tech.
Legal tech, Henchman is all about making it easier for lawyers to make contracts, find the right information, have access to the knowledge that is inside their legal environment, their legal office, or their colleagues. That's a big topic in itself. Henchman has been making this product for about 2 years now. We're doing pretty well there, but it's definitely a busy ocean, that legal tech space. It's a fun thing to work in, because that's actually a sector where I can really see the benefits of AI immediately being used, making people's lives easier.
That's a very interesting one.
Yeah,
let's talk about that in a minute. So for a lot of people, you became known from your Showpad history. Maybe a little bit more on your history and also how AI came into play.
Yeah, so I've been CTO at Showpad for quite a long time. Before that, I was a CTO In the Pocket, and before that, made some medical software. In general, I've been working in tech, I think, for nearly half my life, I was always very keen on. I was an early user of modern technology, I would say. Because we never really had access to the typical products. We didn't really have Windows PCs at home, so I kind of had to. I remember we even had to make our own, compiler, so to speak. For Mac in the beginning, before even MetroWorks had a decent compiler. My dad and I, we did spend some time tinkering, more time tinkering than other people regularly did. So I think that set me up kind of for a career automatically into software. I really always loved making software products as a really young person. And I've always been interested in the academic side as well. So that actually got me interested into AI pretty early on, back when it was all CPU based. So everything.
When was that?
So that was more of my university period, I would say, as a student. So the year I just picked out of, that was very early. So that's more like 2000s. And then I started making regular software, so to speak.
Okay.
I never really used AI, I think, in that capacity. No, I didn't at all. And only pretty late in the game. I mean, we did some crazy things within the Pocket. Like we made some pretty crazy applications, like using hidden audio signals in the waves of audio and in big television broadcasts. That still doesn't really count as AI, so to speak.
More the statistics side of it, or the
shallow things. Yeah, you could say it was all a bit shallow, definitely not deep learning. With Showpad as well, we didn't need that innovations particularly. It was only after that when I looked at companies like RoboVision, which really applied AI on top of production scenarios, that I really got into that, so to speak. So there's definitely eras. For me, AI kind of came back with computer vision models. For me, anyway.
So that's 2012, something
like that. Yeah. I would say, and obviously the first ones were still. I mean, that was really a period of lots of iterative successes, right? So that these things were really, if you were in the game anyway. You could get a lot of neat releases every 6 months. There was a new release. Nowadays, that pace has even quickened for a lot of the text stuff. But computer vision was really something I was always in love with. I always wanted to make something with it. And I think it still has so much opportunity that is still not being totally squeezed out. There's still so much stuff you could automate with these vision models.
So you had your journey starting with tinkering on a Mac with your father, then moving towards 2012 AlexNet. Then that's when AI came back in your life, let's say, as well.
Yeah, as an interest, as a hobby interest, definitely.
Yeah.
I was really I thought that was a really fun period, the way convolutional networks kind of worked. And then later on, obviously the more general architectures came around, the generic architecture, so to speak, with transformers, and that segued into natural text, which is part of a lot what I'm doing right now with Henchman and a lot of the startups I'm seeing and I'm advising or into natural text processing. Yeah.
Okay, cool. In that journey, so we're talking about like, a 10-year journey or more. Well, if you take your first encounters with recurrent neural networks, it's almost 20 years, I'd say. How did you see AI? Did it evolve? You have people saying that it's just the same and we have a bit more. Mm-hmm. They're saying there's changed a lot. I heard another interesting opinion which says it's mainly the culture which changed.
Yeah, that's a good one, I think. Yeah, there's two things I would say. There's the engineering aspect. So with engineering, I mean bricoleren in Dutch, like you make it happen.
How do you say by in English? Fiddling things together?
Something together. Like that? And then there's structural, really deep re-architecturing of how AI works. I would say, for me, not to be underestimated is the hardware evolution, like really tensor operation-focused hardware. It's really difficult to make. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate what happened there in terms of evolution, and that new sort of Moore's law, that separate GPU Moore's law, is really interesting. And there's a lot of deep technology work there that really helped get AI to where it's at and helped the experimentation that was needed. But then the engineering work, definitely we have a lot of fiddling with AI models and with data models as well to kind of make to get to the stage where we're at. And it's kind of a Darwinian process, right? Because the stuff that works kind of survives and spreads on. Stuff that doesn't work, it kind of dies. Like reservoir computing is a good example of something that never so far hasn't ended up really working. But I've always been a fan of the approach of reservoir computing, echo state networks and stuff like that. And maybe they'll come back one day.
So now today you're one of your roles is in Miles Ahead and in Henchman. Could you elaborate a bit more on how AI is involved in there, what you're doing with it?
Yeah. So at Miles Ahead, we focus on deep tech as a kind of sort of a word that is also interpreted in various ways. So it's not really a good word or good terminology. For me, anyway, deep technology is any endeavor where the risk is on the technology and not just on the go-to-market. Okay. It's easier to
name. If the technology fails, the company fails.
Yeah, so to speak. Yeah. Or exactly. And that's definitely where AI comes in. And so much changed like the last 6 months, to be honest, where it's difficult, right? Because nowadays you could make something very innovative that seems very magical, but it's built on top of APIs instead of AI. I think that's interesting, and there's no easy cut answer to that either, because it could still be very innovative way of looking at the problem and cleverly using existing technology to make a new mark. So that whole game of understanding what the IP value is in a product and in a team especially, because in the end, for me, when you look at companies, the team is actually much more important than the current product they're making. That matters a lot, and I think AI is really becoming kind of a sort of the AI strategy of a company is sort of becoming a standard element of the way you look at companies.
And that's then also the part of what you do at Miles Ahead, looking at that technology, at that team, and at their
the inflow. Looking at when it comes to the inflow, we kind of triage and look what kind of companies would be interesting for the portfolio in both ways. So where we can make the difference for them and they can make the difference for us. Yeah, that definitely having an AI strategy that fits with our own insights. Definitely is a key element. Has become a key element. So there's a lot of things that come in that. At Henchman, it's much more acute to just apply AI in a pragmatic manner.
So at Miles Ahead, you're more in the cockpit, looking, okay, that's a good team, that's a good value proposition in terms of technology. They have good IP, or they have the potential to build good IP. At Henchman, you're making your hands dirty, to say.
Yeah, it's a little more hands-on indeed. It's we have a great team, and I'm more involved in defining the strategy, the best way to look at and use the current landscape of AI tools and the AI paradigms. There's interesting paradigms existing right now or emerging right now in natural text processing, like using these agent approaches like AutoGPT and more chaining up language models together. So yeah, that's more hands-on and looking at what used to be impossible or what used to be rabbit holes. Some of these are no longer rabbit holes. Some still are. It's also important.
And how do you filter those? So there's happening like a gazillion things these days in terms of AI. Like you said, in the last, I would say, 4 months, we haven't seen that much happen as in the past 2 years almost. How do you cut through that
noise.
cloud or noise, and how do you determine this is relevant, this is bullshit?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question because I don't know how I do it, and I don't know if I do it very well either. I mean, I definitely try to stay really, really informed. So I think it's also very crucial right now to be really informed, knowing what's engineering and what's fundamental. So what is fiddling and what is fundamental, that really helps, I think. And it's really important. Like, there's been a couple of these new paradigms which are intimately only based on storing, using vector databases to be able to have some kind of memory effect added to your typical natural language processing, which I think is interesting, but which is definitely fiddling. And
it's just putting things together.
And that's why is it important to realize that? Because there's less risk with the fiddling. The fiddling is really good. I mean, the fiddling is really where you should look into, because it gives you things that definitely could work. Like, how do I navigate this? I think I really love some tools, some very basic tools like Twitter to really help navigate innovative spaces. And just being able to track conversations. I spend a lot of my time, I think, just tracking how what people are talking about.
So you have a very well curated list of people you follow, and you follow their conversations to understand what's going on.
It's the same like in science. If you want to be up to date with science, you read papers, but you don't read actual papers. You read abstracts. Like, you just read the bare bones. And I think that's some skill I've always kind of had when navigating technology. It's similar to being able to Google very well. It's just being able to quickly.
So you have a very well-trained bullshit detector, basically.
Yeah, maybe that's it. And maybe you can put it more positively. I have this third eye, maybe that focuses my interest. I think a lot of people in technology kind of have that, where they kind of feel, okay, this could be something interesting, or this is.
So and that's a very intuitive part. So and that's something which makes you strong at what you do. Do you have a way of a process or approaching this? Like, if I'm a company and I want to do a bit, I want to do the Maarten Mortier. How do I do that? Can I? So you need to follow Twitter. What else can I do?
I'm not gonna sell my secrets here, but
but you have a hunch. You have a hunch, and then you're gonna go to the team and like, okay, let's try something out. Or do you say, okay, this is immediately something, let's build, I believe this is it, or how do you approach that?
So first of all, I have to say, it is, with the teams I work with, it is relatively rare that I come up with something that nobody has ever. Sometimes I come up with it a little sooner, in the sense that it kind of confirms their hunch and it kind of gives them more momentum. I'm also not the guy who says like, hey, we have this new library here or this new approach. Let's try to imitate or try to use this. It's more subtle. Like what I, for instance, if you look at these agent models that kind of create this IDs of long-term memory, in LLMs and stuff like that, I immediately look at that and say like, okay, if we do this at Henchman, we can do this use case. I couple it up, I connect it to the
value that it can bring.
Value, yeah, and that is something I would say I'm good at and can help people with connecting that. And similar to the opposite, the reverse approach, where people have an existing value proposition, and I can also extend it a bit by looking like these tools like text to SQL is a good text to SQL is maybe kind of a vague way to describe it, but in general, being able to navigate data using natural texts instead of making these UIs or these forms and then having spending a lot of thought on is this the right form? Is this not too complex? You give them natural text. You could let them do a query like, hey, give me all the sales orders of the past year, exclude the ones, etc. Just let them write it. That insight that could apply to a number of products, and what you need to do that, what you need in your data model to kind of make that happen. Sometimes it's surprisingly little you need. Sometimes you just need to enrich your data model with some things so that text can kind of be used to access it. Yeah, that insight can help a lot when even existing value props suddenly realize, hey, we've been doing this, but maybe with natural text we can extend it a bit. We keep talking about natural text, but the same kind of can happen with vision technology. If you process video, you may be interested in automating part of it, and maybe I'll be the person who says like, this is really hard. Video has a lot of rabbit holes, right? So you should not do this, or maybe this. Yeah, this is definitely possible with the landscape of tools.
So if you see of all of the things that are happening today, what's your perspective on this? So there's a lot of powers at play, even on a geopolitical level, if you want. There's a lot of technology happen. There's the big players like racing. There's a lot of like an abundance of startups in LA. There's no money in the world unless you're in the AI world, basically. How do you look at that?
Yeah, with largely optimism, right? So I can unwrap that because it's a couple of topics I definitely want to mention. So first of all, like the other person said, I don't even know who it was, said that there's a cultural disruption. I truly believe that a lot of the disruption is in the eyes of people right now.
Okay.
I think it's very interesting. And again, talking about these natural text interfaces, I think it will have a deep impact in the way that people want to work with technology, in the sense that they will have expectations. And once you have expectations, it's like a machine that starts whirring, because then the technology vendors will need to match those expectations. And it's good. I think it should snowball off into a kind of a runaway effect where people will get tired of learning how to operate software, learning how to work it. They will just want to have it work. That is one thing I think will change, sort of. That will.
So we don't want software that we want to do too much anymore. It just needs to work, and we want to talk with it.
Yeah,
and it just needs to do what we want.
Yeah, talk with it is actually a very good description, because there's also a lot of software flows where you may not even want to have a screen anymore. You just have to talk with the voice or something, or have some.
So all input is error, basically.
Yeah. So that signal to noise ratio and expectation. I mean, it's really fundamental that we made a lot of software in the past 20 years that needs JSON to work, right? You basically send JSON. Okay, you build a UI, but at the end, the only thing UI does is send some kind of JSON out or some kind of contract. That could change, right? And it's more fundamental than people realize, because people always think about, and I just mentioned actually replacing UIs with text, but actually the UI itself could also become more like, you just make a UI. You don't really make a contract between the UI and the backend, but because the UI follows a certain logic, it could also generically talk to a backend, because obviously that's what it will do. So I think that realization is still only slowly creeping up.
So the fact that the large language model is basically the perfect interface between a human and a machine. That's what you're saying.
Indeed, and it's not just maybe that's what I wanted to emphasize. Not only language, it's just actions, just spatial actions could also. So some of that gets cut away from what typical technology vendors needed to make. I think that's a big disruption that could snowball out into an even bigger one. So that definitely will happen. I believe it will happen. Then the other thing I would mention is also that in terms of cybersecurity, I think we're on the really deep end of it. I think it's really.
What do you mean with the deep end?
I was going to explain, but I'm one of those persons who really early on, back in December already, phoned my mother to tell her like, hey, from this moment on, you should never trust anything anymore.
Yeah, okay.
Any person talking to you, pretending to either be me or somebody else, or any text you get.
Because phishing and spamming and all of those things, they become next level.
Yeah, the conversational element, when that gets into the mix, it becomes another game, right? And the scalability as well of having these. I mean, it's a lot more scalable. You can nowadays phishing. So early phishing was more focused on introducing very simple selection criteria. So you made spelling errors in your message because then you trap people who look past them, who are more gullible. That will change, right? Because the net you cast is much wider.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that will change. There's really things we should look into as a society in that. I think adding more biometrics to the mix could really help, meaning use fingerprint data more with biometric stuff so you know that the person that sent it is exactly that person. So there needs to be more low-level fabric solution to that, I think. So I think that's something that is kind of acute, so to speak, for society. But that's a big disruption, right? The way that strategies can be deployed, like it's a meta level, right? I could, instead of having a hacker or a bad actor just focus on one specific strategy, like I want to do a B-post thing where I try to hack the system, and whenever I know people are going to receive a package, send them an email, so they enter it and enter their credit card by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Typical scammer action that could be quite successful. You now go the level above that, and you just make AI find out strategies and deploy them by itself. So,
Be careful with the table.
Yeah, sorry.
Microphone doesn't love it.
Yeah, but it emphasizes the risk and the danger, right? So it's doom.
Yeah.
It's more of it's a doom scenario. And I think, that's deep impact. Something I wanted to pick out, at least, to talk about here. That people should. I think it's also part of what people are worried about.
Are you worried about it?
So the societal aspect, I think society will take care of itself, so to speak. I am worried about, generally, I feel people are less hungry for facts than they should be, meaning they rely more on
So we need
emotion.
to be more critical in our thinking.
Yeah, I think, but so that is difficult to enforce, right? So I am worried that the only solution to a lot of these problems will be more central authority, so to speak. That is something I haven't spent a whole long time thinking about, but that I always come back to it. Central authority is not as far as controlling which technology necessarily can still be created, but more central authorities in terms of trust relationships. So you can also only trust these websites, only this and this. That's a conflicting set of values, right? Either you go full Monty freedom, but then you have more risk for these. So I think for me it's difficult to understand right now how we're going to marry these new extravagant ways at fooling people with freedom on the internet. It's difficult connection in my head.
And what would be the first step?
So like I said, I think biometrical data, but that precludes as well a central authority who manages that. It could be a really helpful thing to differentiate actors.
Okay, so we had LLMs being the perfect interface between humans and machines and actions of machines.
Yeah,
we have the worries or challenges which comes with.
And I said I was optimist, and I still mentioned only two.
Yes, and now I'm looking for the third one.
Yeah, but I love the whole. There's this. I remember this XKCD comic with the person asking how much would this cost to develop, and it's like something simple that they expect takes a very long time, and then at the end they ask, can you recognize the bird or something? And then the person developing it said, sorry, I need 4 years and a PhD team. So a lot of that kind of changed because it's possible to dream again in terms of technology and to make some crazy magical technologies, especially if you combine sensor, like if you combine superhuman sensor data, like being able to get hyperspectral data or just camera data that is accesses a lot of data at the same time that you cannot as a human do. You can make conclusions and actions that feel
scale of the
superhuman.
data at which you can look at the types of data.
So right now we're still in a phase where we're kind of like equi-human behavior, like we're like chasing just the scalability of having 10,000 humans doing your work. Okay, that's fine, it's cool, but I'm more excited about doing stuff that we could not do yet, like identify things immediately, like in a nanosecond. Just feels impossible. Maybe even solving some mathematical problems with that. Like there's a couple of things definitely in like discrete mathematics or problems that have been fascinating mankind for a very long time. Maybe we have some machines that could really crunch it.
And that would help us then in, for instance, bioengineering or healthcare in general.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of these problems that seem very mathematical, but they have really deep impacts on.
Could you give an example?
You could have encryption as a very typical example, still kind of a boring one, where you could define new encryption standards that cannot be broken, are very quantum resilient. But in terms of astronomy, for instance, discovering more about like astronomy is a really big data problem, right? It's just all of this spectral data comes at us, and we just need to filter it because we don't have the manpower to really help. So a lot of that will help us. Of course, if the deeper question is, does astronomy help us anything? I think, it's a difficult conversation, right? Because what's the purpose of anything, doing anything at all? But scientifically, there's definitely reasons why I would say AI, even in its decade-old state, has been underused, and hopefully they will bridge that gap by using these systems, these data crunchers. Because that's actually all they are right now, in better ways.
All right. So what I hear you saying is that there's a lot happening today, and you don't have the right answers either. So there's a lot of moving things. If we move forward, how do you see this impacting companies? How should companies deal with this?
Yeah. So one observation I wanted to make, maybe now that you mentioned. One thing I wanted to tell you is that a funny observation. Is that by making interfaces that are more human-like, because we now have the capability, you also make technology much more easily swappable, because you can have a company who makes a very compelling product, but if all you need as a human is to interact very intuitively with it, you could easily swap it for another product because you don't have any relearning to do. So that is one fundamental change. I think it could cause AI to become more of an era of more smaller, fragmented companies that have less people. So that's another factor, is that maybe you need less people because there's the no-code, to be honest, environment together with the capabilities of AI, I just have some accelerative effects. I've just last week talked to a good friend of mine who made a complete website with everything on it, everything at the same time, content in just one day, using a combination of really the typical no-code tools and AI to provide a lot of the content. So there's for me reasons to assume that future corporate landscape might be smaller, fragmented companies that have more dynamic, like molecules in a bigger medium. So it could be more dynamic than what it is now, which is more like the income is becoming bigger, necessarily bigger.
But if I translate that, so you see that scattering, but that's in the software layer.
So then you have the providers of the technology,
but if you look at the providers of technology and hardware, supply chains, manufacturing.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there that there's the opposite motion. Is right now where you have more of these foundation models, so to speak. There's only a couple of them. I have to admit that right now, from a technological viewpoint, although I'm not completely settled on it, it seems that the approach on is to have very big generic models and then have some shallow fine-tuning on top of them. It seems that this is going to be the natural evolution, and it also seems that ultimately we will get into limits of hardware, into limits of resources that are not there for mere mortals, that are only there for really a couple of few. It seems that way. But honestly, I cannot make that prediction. Why? Because there's also, not to be underestimated, a huge undercurrent of new computer architectures coming up. We are still talking about silicon hardware right now. Just everything is like PN conjunction based. It's all of the same stuff. There's a lot of new computer architectures coming, photonic chips, etc. Maybe in our lifetimes, those could really, really completely change the game as well.
Because they make it affordable for
they could
a smaller company to do a large language model.
A a lot of these technologies could really have a completely different energy efficiency curve as well, and could, of course, in the beginning be much more expensive than what we have now. But that could be that can be resolved. So I have reasons to believe that is also going to be a temporary condition.
But then we're talking 10, 20 years, I guess.
Yeah. Right now it feels like because the market is kind of controlled by bigger. Some of that is controlled, right? Some of the technological innovation is controlled. Academics only get so much grants for doing their stuff. It's all control. I have to say, the older I get, the more I realize that a lot of big reason why technology is in the current state is because of the market. Is purely because of just really capitalism, so to speak. So and that's not a bad thing, but it's definitely what happens as well. So that could change as well, but not easily, right?
All right. So you're saying you see a movement towards a scattered landscape, because as a one-man army or a few people army, you can do already quite a lot in the software landscape. You mentioned that one logical path is big tech owning those large language models and offering those to the market. But you also mentioned that compute might, because the amount of compute you can have for the euros you pay can change a lot because of new computer architectures. All of these things happening, then at the same time we see in hardware, I would say innovation is still pretty slow in comparison to software. How do you see that as a company? What should I do now?
What should you do as a company? So I think you should definitely focus on your customer and on your own energy and your own DNA, what you want to do as a founder. So that's going to be your primary focus, because you only have a limited amount of time in life. So you should try to do something that is great, that's fun, and that helps other people. So not completely settled on the idea that there is no open source LLMs, by the way. There's definitely going to be these. There's going to be sort of a game. But as a software company, I think you have a couple of approaches. You have you could go deep, right? And try to carve out a piece of unique IP that kind of becomes like an investment, because it could be fundamentally new and fundamentally innovative, like a new model, a new language model that gets picked up and gets. That could be one technique, but I think most people right now are on the fence of that and are really looking at the other approaches, being working smart instead of hard, trying to look at ways that, with integrity towards your customers' data, because that's a big concern, you use third parties as efficiently as possible to sketch out ideas and then see maybe how that works in the next step once you have some proven PMF, some proven market fit for that. You can try to maybe pull it a little more closer to you and rely less on these third parties, and then hope for the innovation to pick up and have some open source equivalents. That I think that's I'm not saying anything new there, I think, but it seems like a sound strategy to focus on innovating, focus on keeping up. Because I think a concern that a lot of software vendors might have, especially the established ones, that there's a lot of noise in the market.
Exactly.
And there's two types of noise, right? Either your potential buyer or your existing customer is becoming a little fearful, and paralysis analysis. They don't want to buy anything anymore because they're like on the lookout. Also, they have a build versus buy ambiguity, because everything sometimes gets looked at as easy to build on top of third parties. So there's that. But there's also an uncertainty and a noise in the sense that you have a lot of competitors claiming X, claiming Y, claiming Z, and it's all stuff you need to work around with. So really making your sales team and your early SDR team, etc., aware of the space you're operating in is really fundamentally important as well. Identifying. So I never believe in chasing competitors, because that could be a rabbit hole in itself, and it could also just lead you to chase your own tail, so to speak. But having really good information on the current state of the art, like every month planning this session, it doesn't take that much time, right? You just get your team together and really look what is happening, what did we hear from prospects, how are they approached by competitors, and try to stay on top of the game that way. is really fundamental, I would say.
And then you map that out and you go to work with it, or what do you do with that? So you come together, you collect information, and then what's next?
You try. First of all, you carve your own way, right? You have your own set of innovations that you want to do or accelerate, even with new technology, and you just try to map that out against that. Sometimes you need to adjust, and it's all about having some pivotal power where you can do that, right? If you feel your organization lacks nimbleness to move, I think you will have some rough times if you are also in the situation of being facing a lot of noise from other products that claim to do some things better. That's not a good combination to have. You should have.
So, and that's definitely in the startup scale-up scene. Do you see that if you look at enterprise world happening as well? So the point you were making is you need to be informed, you need to be nimble to be able to react fast. Do you see the same for large corporates?
Yeah, so there's a lot of angles to software, right? And when you make software for big enterprises, you're doing more than just the UI, and this is usually a transformative process that you helped organize in the company. So all of that kind of remains. So it depends, right? If you have deep ERP integrations, etc., you're kind of locked into the customer's processes. You're not necessarily disrupted by just this new thing that completely takes that over. It's a deeper fundamental thing you did there than just delivering software. But you should not rest on your laurels in that sense necessarily. I don't really have a clear-cut answer there, Davio. I'm kind of mumbling myself out of that one. But it's really it's the same for big corporations and smaller scale-ups. They have the same need for being nimble. Sketching out, maybe the old approach of sketching out R&D teams that kind of do fast beta releases could help. And to be honest, with modern dev tools, it gets a little more easier to refactor, maybe to make automated tests as well for supporting refactoring is also something that got a lot more easy with AI. So maybe that's also something I could leave behind.
All right. Now, all of this together, there's a lot happening. We need to be nimble. We need to move fast. We need to be informed. How do you see this moving in the next few years? How do you prepare?
Are you looking for the next few years or the next few decades? What's your?
Let's start with the next few years and then go to the decades.
I think now is a fun period of a lot of engineering on top of these new. So we have natural text interfaces. We have. Looks like an extra era of computer vision models as well, if you look at some of the new things that were released last month. So a lot of it I will see as automating the hell out of things, right? A lot of it will be about that. And
automation.
Yeah, I think we're in a phase where, for us, geeks, so to speak, we love automating stuff.
No,
you also love everybody loves automating and just making it work automatically. So that will happen. And at the same time, consumers are starting to love it as well, so they will also be part of that wave. And then the even bigger macroeconomically concerned people love automation because that gives them more control. If there's like one central thing that is kind of automated,
everybody geek.
Everybody is into it. So I think that will definitely be the next couple of years will be a lot about that. Socioeconomic repercussions are ambiguous, right? Because we always talk about job replacement. I think we should also talk about work-life balance that could change for the better, so to speak. That then gives you another, it's a whole Jenga game or a whole domino game where stones start dropping, because that leads you into, should we now be really thinking about more social initiative like universal basic income? Yeah, indeed, it's all linked. Every time I talk about AI at any length of time, I stumble upon UBI. It's somehow linked. Maybe it's in our heads. Maybe we forced that linkage, but it seems natural.
I still feel there's something off. I can't explain it really well, but economy is about supply and demand. And if everybody gets €1,000, €1,000 becomes not valuable anymore because everybody has it. It's not a limited resource anymore. Then you'll have another problem, which means that money is worth nothing.
Yeah, it's a principal argument, but it's kind of circular because the same applies to the current economy, so to speak. The same argument about nonsensicality also applies to the current. So I'm not sure if it's that. I think there's lots of talk that could lead to some kind of in between solution there, but it's linked, right? So when it comes to the automation of so just to give the example of legal tech, people should have better access to legal services, so to speak. I think so. Anyway, if my insurer, for instance, does not want to pay back 500 euros on something, I'm not going to sue that person because it costs way too much money to sue things. It's like
that's more than 500 euros.
So maybe there's a couple of lookouts there. Maybe people are just going to have more access to that. A legal office is going to be able to provide better services, and then
so it will become like you call your plumber, or like the things which everybody can afford these days. That will be something which becomes a lot more affordable then.
Yeah, or you have several service levels where this types of services are more automatic than others. Now they're all on the same level. They're all like the same heavy, like really heavy duty things you try to do. Some of them could be more
So that would mean that the demand for it would then increase.
Yeah. So I think a lot
enormously.
Yeah, that's a side effect of automation that can arise. That demand can increase. Another thing that can pop up is complete fatigue, where people just get. I love the example of somebody writing a motivational letter for getting a job, and they don't want to write the damn letter anymore, so they just write summarize it, and then let ChatGPT write the letter. And the person who receives the letter gets the letter. He doesn't want to read a letter because
he summarizes it again.
He summarizes it again, and then you had this letter in the background that served no purpose whatsoever except for this overly bloated interface between them. That could happen. I think it could lead to a certain fatigue. That is visualizes the fatigue, and there's a deeper concern.
What kind of fatigue then?
That people don't want to write or read anything anymore because
so we'll just communicate in bullet points.
It's possible that we will adapt our language to that machine interface. But I think there's a deeper concern there that I wanted to mention, because that also means we do not have any new data for algorithms to train with. And currently we're still definitely in a phase where we need data to make models. Yeah, and it's really fundamental. There's different approaches to AI. The approach that we have.
So AI is going so fast that it's taking away its own resources.
Yeah, and it's not only going so fast; it's going still in that same direction of needing data. Whether it could also go in a different direction, could have even gone in a different direction where it builds up concepts like your child. When a child learns to draw, when you ask a child to draw a bowl of walnuts, the child will typically first draw spherical objects and then kind of make sure they don't overlap and then start drawing details if it's at that level yet. When AI models learn about these things, they sometimes get a very haphazard flow of information, which is completely different. It also has the same end result. Midjourney can draw you perfect, beautiful balls of walnuts caught by the sunlight, whatever you wanted. But it might not have that same conceptual integrity because it's very data hungry.
That it needs. It doesn't understand the picture. It just from memory combines some things it knows,
and that causes it to be very data hungry, and we might starve it by not giving it any new data. And I think that's a worry I have. I've been talking a lot about pessimistic worries, even though I'm very optimist. But it's
so you have automation. Then we need to make sure that we have enough data, which also gives a bit of a perspective. Maybe we need to find another way of building AI, which is less data hungry.
Yeah, maybe AI will help building that. I don't know yet about that meta level. I have some concerns with that, but it could be the case where AI helps us get out of that. Similar to how AI may help us get out of the copyright stuff because it can detect those things very easily. So yeah.
So that's the coming years, automation. What do you see if you go 10 years, 20 years? What do you see happening?
For me, it becomes more difficult to predict than I used to because I was.
So what you're saying is, if I would have asked this to you 10 years ago, you would have been much more confident about your prediction than you are
That could be my own naivety as a younger person as well. That plays. What could happen? I do believe that some people. So I'm just going to take this question as free as I want.
Of course.
I do believe there's going to be a religious aspect to the way people look at technology, where people will. I've always predicted this, that from the moment that there's human-like capabilities to technology,
And God AI.
yeah, so that people will start looking at it as kind of like a pure form of opinion, even a pure opinion, because it's not encumbered by human emotions and temporality of life, so to speak. And so they may look at it like, hey, this is the eternal being, this is the thing that we always wanted. This is because we wanted to have something that speaks our language but is not encumbered by being have emotional motivations or fears. So I'm worried about that because I think people generally get a little bit crazy when they get religious. I'm not going to go about. I think there's obviously good things as well, and a lot of really famous scientists, etc., have fundamental religious beliefs, and I think they probably have spent more time thinking about it than I have. But still, there's fundamental risks when everybody starts clogging to these things. Now, that's one prediction. Again, quite a pessimistic one. So maybe after this podcast, I will consider that. Maybe I'm not so optimistic at all. Another prediction, and I think that might come a little sooner than we expected it to be, is that people will question their own intelligence. Whether or not intelligence is really as a fundamental thing as we make it.
Are we as smart as we think?
Yeah, are we as unique? What is? So there's always been these talks, and if you pay attention to animal sciences, there's really a lot of debate. Even like wasps, they only have 5,000 neurons. Or wasps, what makes a wasp, so to speak, non-intelligent? Because it has a very complex attitude to life. It remembers things. It remembers fears. Are insects intelligent? Are they sentient beings? Because they have such a remarkably complex attitude to life. Still, some people anyways pay no heed at them, and just they don't care about a bug that's killed. So a lot of that will come back, I think, boomerang us when we make machines that look really intelligent. We're also going to look at ourselves and our lives, all of life in general. And that could be kind of
one part of the future is we'll question our beliefs and ourselves, actually. And so let's call that a dystopian view on things.
But questioning is not necessarily dystopian. It could lead to free, because in the end, that's kind of what Buddhism also aspires to. Is that you go.
It will make us more critical then.
Yeah, and in the end, you also get detached from the idea that you are more than just something that is in motion. Because if you look at, for instance, fundamental religious beliefs like Buddhism, they will actually aspire that all you are is atoms, your waves of atoms crashing against your skin, and it's like you are just something that motions through space and time, and it's through space-time. So I think that's an interesting thing to have, that people are more humble and they do not think themselves as being some kind of elevated beings. So that could actually be a good thing, not necessarily a dystopian thing.
All right. Anything you want to add on that future look? How will the professional world look like?
That's a difficult one. I don't know how UIs will look like. I don't know if we'll have these neural interfaces and stuff like that. That kind of
we're connected with the Neuralink to.
It solves a lot of problems. If you think about it, like security-wise, it solves a lot of problems, because I know I'm talking to you with that Neuralink. I know it's not a kind of Android Davio. But so I digressed a little there. I don't really know how technology will look like in the coming years. I hope it's actually something I'm completely unfamiliar with, because that seems like the best thing that could happen, right? When technology progresses so far that it's... Because if I'm very honest, the last 20 years, in terms of web development, have been very stagnant. I mean, if I look at what happened after Flash died, it's kind of embarrassing sometimes, the amount of stuff we celebrate. Like, we celebrate that we can animate rounded directs. I mean, it's... so I think a lot more could happen there. I do read some science fiction.
So what you're saying is that this will lead us to having a lot better interfaces, because that's where the differentiation will happen, basically.
Yeah. So that's actually good. You put me back on that track, because indeed, I think people will be more, hopefully more creative at that aspect, because the other aspects is pretty much could be solved for, if I look in the future, right? I'm not really looking at current technology necessarily, but just the technology path that's unfolding. Yeah, maybe people will again appreciate delight, appreciate ease of use, and not, transparency. So we get into that Star Trek kind of interweaving of reality and synthetics.
Yes. So Elon Musk is onto something, and then his Starship and Neuralink and.
I won't say. I think Elon Musk is a good example of how we should be also critical to senior voices, because I'm not a real fan of the AI pause letter and stuff like that. I think it's very, it feels very non-actionable. It feels very light. And I think in general, people are a little too much in awe sometimes of senior people, and they do not criticize them the way they would if a young person would have written something like that. She or he would be immediately shut down for not being very accurate and not defining what are you talking about even. And I think that there's some things and some critique I have for in general for people who are. I think the intersection of people who are very famous and the people who deserve to be very famous is a very thin intersection.
Okay. And on that one, maybe final one then. So we're really looking at the extremes right now. Let's say so I don't know what your dystopian and utopian future is in this whole evolution of AI, maybe AGI, and these days they already use ASI, superintelligence. What's your dystopian future? How would that look like?
Dystopian one, the bad one. I can tell you horror stories. I'm not sure if they're, because in the end, if machines would really have it in for us and they would have the capabilities to do that, I think most people are very unimaginative and they think that machines would kill us. They would basically also be able to keep us alive forever and to infinity and beyond, which is a much more drastic and a much more horrible future for mankind, I think, than the idea of them getting rid of us or something like that. Honestly, I think all of that is really, really science fiction. There's so many physically impossible barriers to cross if you want algorithms to escape. It seems like a very fundamentally infantile debate sometimes. So
let's make a realistic dystopian future then.
A realistic one. That's Davio. For me, the most realistic one. For me, the realistic one closest to what I'm seeing right now is that people just stop caring about each other, about that there's some aspect of it is possible to have a condition called psychopathy where you simply do not care about other people. I have again sometimes wondered if that could be maybe an increasing medical condition in people that we do not observe, that we do not test for.
Because we're more into computers or how do you see
I wouldn't say it links to computers or to video games or something like that. No, it's more fundamental. It could be something that we do not check, and that happens. And that worries me that people could in general become less empathic than they want. That brings me to the more happy scenario.
So let's say AI, AGI, we all go to the positive side, the utopian view.
Yeah, I think AGI could really help us. So if that thing is ever there, so if it can process data in ways that, it's a difficult debate for me, because I honestly do believe that once we get close to AGI, we're going to realize it's not even a thing. It's not really a goal to aspire to anyway. But in the end, suppose we have some kind of acceleration of technology that helps us fundamentally. I think one of the most positive outcomes is that we would be able to engineer empathy, and we would have that core aspect. You know, the Kardashev barriers for human. So every civilization has a bunch of levels to go through, and we're basically close to a Kardashev 1 society in the sense that we are at the technological capacity to take the energy from our planet and convert it into energy that we can use for other mechanisms. The Kardashev 2 is able to do that for their nearest star. And the Kardashev 3 is able to do that for the galaxy that they're operating. So we are close to Kardashev 1, but it takes a lot of barriers to go over that Kardashev 1. And one of them, I think, is internal struggle, is conflict. And I think empathy, fundamental engineered empathy, could really help us there. Not that clear-cut, not easy, because you need conflict as well for progress. So it's a deep subject. But yeah, that
Very
could
deep
definitely
one.
help us. And another thing that really helps us as well is fundamentally technically scenarios like asteroid impact is something fundamentally we're not currently equipped at. People are kind of panicky in the idea that we are, but we are definitely very, very, very bad at predicting asteroid impacts and doing anything about them. So I think that's fundamentally something.
How would AGI help with that?
Well, just so we lack the material insight, we lack the propulsionary technology, so we lack a couple of really clear engineering capacity
To get to an asteroid or to do what?
To do anything about it, to predict that it's coming, to predict where, and to have a very accurate response. I do believe that it falls within, if you look at the capacity of science, the insight into maybe material design, nanomaterial design, solid materials and propulsion techniques in general. We don't need crazy relativistic stuff to make that happen. We can do that with current technology. I think it's just not scalable. It's not carried by humanity. And I think, artificial intelligence could help if they had that objective to make that. And if it was that far out intelligence it could help make this shield. And I think it's an important shield. People underestimate, those kind of things are really what really matters.
So your utopian future is AI helping us to protect the world.
Yeah, indeed, and ourselves. And I think indeed empathy. If we could find a way of making sure that kind of evens out, so people are really empathic without destroying themselves through the process, because empathy is can be quite. If you have too much of it, it can be. It's not an easy thing, of course, but I think that could, that internal struggle, if we could finally learn to live in peace with each other through that technology, that could be really helpful.
So peace and protecting the world, that's what AI has in.
Yeah, the right amount of conflict, exactly the right dosage for the right time, that would be, that could be great.
So Maarten, thank you. It was very interesting. We talked about stuff going from recurrent neural networks to quantum to reservoir computing, but I'm pretty sure you can make a better summary than I do.
I'll try, but I'll keep it short. I think it's good to be excited about AI. It's good to be fearful about AI, and it's good to be skeptical about AI. And I think we should, for now, manage to do all those three things together as much as possible.
All right. Thank you. And ciao.
Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more, don't hesitate to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for the next episodes of Future Forward, where we'll be unraveling the AI future, one expert at a time.